Okay, let's now proceed with our discussion on the lexicon. When we say the lexicon, we refer to the vocabulary of a particular language. In this case, in this particular lesson, we mean that as learners of English, we are now starting to build our own vocabulary according to specific social activity that we are doing or our particular role in the society. Now, when we say lexicon, as we have mentioned, we refer to inventory of words. We refer to vocabulary that's not limited only to simple words, but this also includes compounds and complex. Traditionally, lexicon is actually viewed totally different from grammar. That is to say, in 1994, Halliday uh, thought of coining the term lexicogrammar, which means um, combining the principles or conventions of grammar or vocabulary. I mean grammar, rules of the language, and lexicon or vocabulary. Because in several cases, no, in several cases, we our structure, our observance of the rules of the language is correct. However, the meaning of the words do not actually the way we use the words, our choice of words are not our choice of word is not actually sophisticated as it has to be. For example, there is a popular sentence that says, "During my sleepless nights, I dreamt furiously colorless green ideas." If you try to look at the grammar of the sentence, the rules of the language, the structure, there is actually no problem in this sentence. The structure is correct. The way words, the tenses of the words are correct. The spelling, they are all correct. However, if you try to look at the meaning of each word used in the sentence, and if they are associated to the way they are being used in the sentence, actually, there is actually a problem. Looking at the sentence, looking at this particular phrase, "During my sleepless nights, I dreamt furiously." If you are trying to understand the statement, sa mga gabing hindi ka nakakatulog, nanaginip ka. How can that actually be possible? During the time that you cannot sleep, you actually had the chance to dream. And you are dreaming furiously. That means the dream is very vivid, but it's actually colorless. And you have identified that it's green. That makes it actually a problem at this point. Now, there are two possible reasons why a lexicogrammar needs to be observed. Number one, interlingual argument. Number two, intra-language argument or perspective. When we say interlingual argument, that means the language, for example, in our case, Filipino, the way we say things in Filipino may not be realized lexically, grammatically in other languages like English. When we say intra-language perspective, remember, language is arbitrary. Its order is arbitrary. Its meaning is likewise arbitrary. That means the arbitrariness of a particular language has been set um, long before we have studied all of these things, and therefore, what we need to understand at this point is that these are constants already, and what we need to do is to follow them. For example, noun phrases, the structure of prepositional phrase, like "by the way." The structure of this prepositional phrase must always be a preposition which is by, a noun phrase. You have determiner the and noun way. This is constant already. That means by no means we are more than capable to rearrange the words the way we want it. Why? Because it becomes constant already. Its arbitrariness becomes constant. Now, the very question is that what does it mean to know a word? How do we know the meaning of a particular word? To know the meaning of a particular word or to understand the word better, we have to look at all of these things. We have to look at spelling, we have to look at its phonetic representation so we know how to pronounce the word properly. We have to look at morphological regularity or irregularity. If there are marked on if there are marked or unmarked situations that can happen in a sentence. That means typicality and untypicality of a word, sorry, not a sentence. We also have to look at syntactic features and restrictions. We have to look at its number. We have to look at it. We have to look at its tense, if that's a verb, etc. Also have to look at derivations and collocations. No, when we say derivations, if there are affixes that can be attached to the word, so its grammar classification or grammar unit classifications can change. Or we have to look at its collocation, like what are the other words that we can associate to a particular word. Like in this case, we have child. We can associate child to hood, to play, labor, and psychology. We also have to look at the semantic features and restrictions. This is very much limited to nouns or to living things. No, that's why we have to consider if it refers to human, if it is concrete or abstract, if it is male or female, if it is adolescent or adult. And then the last, we have to look at the pragmatic features and restrictions. We have to look into how words are being used. Let us say child is similar with kid, son and daughter, and kids in the case that it becomes plural. No, however, in some cases, the use of the word child and the use of the word kid may not be interchangeably. That means we can only use the word child in certain with certain limitations, the way we also have to use kid with certain limitations. Now, let's look at the English morphemes. No, we generally English morphemes we refer to free and bound. When we say free, we look at its lexical content and grammatical function. Lexical content, we mean these are the major parts of speech. That means these are words, and they carry a lot of meaning. These are the nouns, pronouns, verb, adverbs, and adjectives. Grammatical function, we refer to minor parts of speech. Yes, they are words, but their function in the sentence is minor because they only carry limited roles, no? Like they are determiners, they are conjunctions. Okay. Second, bound. When we say bound, this is totally different from free. Why? Because free morphemes, they are words and they can stand alone. In the case of bound, they need to be always attached to a free morpheme. So we mean that these are affixes, these are affixes, these are suffixes, these are prefixes. No, derivational morphemes, we refer to affixes, suffixes that allows a change of grammar unit classification. Let us say from noun to pronoun, verb to noun, etc. Grammar or grammatical function refers to inflectional morphemes that provides the idea that the word retains its grammar classification. It's just that the number changes, the tense changes, but it remains to be the same. No. Next, these are the affixes that are used to show inflection. In the case of verbs, we have S sub 1 to denote present tense, ed sub 1 to denote simple past tense, ing to denote present participle, past participle for en or ed sub 2. In the case of nouns, we have S sub 2 for plurality of the nouns, S sub 3 for to show possessions, no, of the nouns. Involving adjectives naman, We have ER to show comparison and EST to show the superlative degree of the adjective. We also have inflectional affixes that are not actually suffixes. Why? Because there is a change in spelling. There is a change actually in spelling, but and there is a change in terms of the degree. However, they remain to be verbs in this case. So we have or nouns, no? So we have internal vowel change. We have mouse singular, and we say mice for plural. Ring, rang, and rung in the case of verb. So there is a change, but only limited to vowels. Next one is there is no really change at all, but we are using counters instead of saying, in the case of one deer, to denote its plurality, we say several deer. Okay? And in the case of the word hit, we say hit, hit, hit. There is a change in terms of meaning and its tense, but there's no actually change in terms of inflection or meaning. We also have suppletive form. When we say suppletive form, there is a change simply because the degree of its meaning changes as well. So when we say go, it's in the present tense. When we say went, it is now in the past form. When we say be, that is in the present tense. When we say was, it's actually in the past form. The same case also can be observed with good, better, best, and bad, worse, and worse. These are suppletives because these provides you degrees of adjectives. Okay. Next item is pronunciation. Pronunciation is also a key in understanding a word because it's very critical. Now, our examples here, these are the allomorphs of the S sounds. When we say allomorphs, these are the three different sounds that we have every time you see or experience the S sound. No, the S sounds can be pronounced as is, z, and s, depending on the distribution of the sounds prior to it. So let us say the S sound can be pronounced as is, provided that prior to the S sounds, we have s, z, sh, z, d. So these are the sounds, these are our considerations for us to pronounce the word, for us to pronounce the sound, the S sound as is. So instead of saying judges, we have to say judges. Instead of saying roses, we have to say roses. Instead of saying rushes, we have to say rushes. Now, in the case that prior to the S sounds, you have voiced sounds. That in that case, the allomorph for S is Z. So you have to say dogs, toys, johns, jays, runs, and cries. In the case that prior to the S sound are all voiceless sounds, then these refer to the authentic S sound, like S. So we say cats, marks, and walks. Now, knowing the word also entails lexical features, no? And when we say lexical features, we have to look at association of words to each other. There is a limitation when it comes to the use of there is limitation when it comes to the number of the nouns, and that can only be determined by a determiner. Now, by a determiner. For one, that is the very reason why it is called as a determiner. Okay? Next, there is also restriction in terms of adjective and prepositions, no? Because there is also transitivity of adjectives. When we say transitivity of adjectives, once adjective becomes transitive, that means it is an adjective that requires an object similar to verbs, no? Similar to verbs. Whenever a verb requires an object, that means it has to have a noun close to it. In this case, adjectives can also be transitive that would require an object. To have an object beside the adjective, it has to be a prepositional phrase. Similar to the phrase like fond of sweets. So you have preposition of, and you have a noun, sweet. So we cannot just simply end a sentence by simply saying he is fond. The very question is he is fond of what? And so we have to complete that. There must be a complete thought. That's why we have to also at some point observe transitivity of adjectives. Another is the word nervous. The adjective nervous can be transitive or it can be intransitive. We can just simply say he is nervous, or we can just say he is nervous about the quiz. In this case, about the quiz is a prepositional phrase and a transitive to the word nervous. Now, there is also verb noun restrictions, as I have mentioned. We also have to look at its transitivity. We have to look at if the verbs we are using are copula. These copula means they are change of state verbs. And so they look like the structure is very similar to linking verb, but they function totally different from linking verbs. Now, co-occurrence restrictions involving prepositions. When we say co-occurrence restrictions involving prepositions, we mean these phrases are constant already, like to rely on, to be cognizant of, in my opinion, to my mind, in lieu of, with regard to. That means there's no reason at all for us to change prepositions, those that are bolded. So when you say when you would like to say to rely on, it really has to be to rely on, not to rely in or not to rely of. It's very similar with may I call on. We always, it has to be may I call on, not may I call in. Or every time you say on the stage, it has to be on the stage, not in the stage. That is actually an example of restrictions that involves prepositions. Now, we also have processes to form a particular word or to produce a particular word. In that particular case, we have to observe compounding. When we say compounding, we are trying to form words. We are trying to form words that are we're trying to form words by combining two words. By combining two words, it can be a noun plus a noun plus a verb, a noun plus a verb plus er, or an adjective plus noun. It could be a preposition plus noun. It could be a lot of things. So as long as we are forming a word by combining two words together, we call that compounding. Second is derivation affixes. When we say derivation affixes, we're trying to form another word by placing affixes, prefixes, suffixes, and the grammar unit classification changes. That's also one particular principle in how to form a new word. Second, we have conversion. When we say conversion, that means we are trying to convert one particular unit to another, one particular word from a different grammar unit classification to another. Now, this might sound similar to derivation. The difference is that there is no derivational affixation in this case. There's no derivation affixation that's happening. Except for example in the case of butter and buttered, we only add here ed, no, suffix ed do not actually normally change the grammar unit classification of a word. Hindi nagbabago yun, no, hindi siya nagbabago. That is what we call by conversion. Okay. Now, when we say homonymy and polysemy, we are trying now to look at or to understand the word according to its use, according to its form, according to its sound. When we say according to its use, because there can be a range of meaning of a particular word with the same sound and with the same spelling. When we say same form and same sound, we're looking at orthography and we're looking at the way we pronounce the word. There can be no change at all, but the meaning is different as well. So for example, when we say homophony, that means there is similarity in terms of sound. When we say homography, that means there's similarity in terms of spelling. When we say polysemy, that means there's similarity in terms of sound and spelling, but there is a range of meaning. So in the case of homophony, the word there, and there, they have different spellings, but they sound the same, then the meaning is totally different from each other. So in the case of wind and wind, it's the same spelling, but different sounds and different meaning. In the case of the word live, it can be he lives in Manila is totally different from he lives. So the first sentence shows residence, and then the other sentence shows life. Okay? Now, when we talk of lexical features and restrictions, we're looking at compatibility and incompatibility semantically in terms of constructions. So we have to look at if we have to make sure if, for example, the verbs are well associated with its subject. In the case, the idea developed, this is a correct sentence. But if you try to replace the word develop with laugh, there can be a problem. Why? Because the ideas are not laughing, but they can be developed. In the same case with verb-object relationship, the harsh winter killed the plants. Definitely winter can actually kill the plants. That's why there's perspective of autumn. No? However, winter cannot actually kill the rocks. Why? Because rocks from the very onset are all lifeless. Next item is that the mare was pregnant. That's correct. But it can never happen that a stallion becomes pregnant because from the onset, a stallion is a male. Okay? Now, this is our hierarchy of semantic features and restrictions. So we have common, abstract, and concrete. From the concrete, we have living and non-living. Living items or living nouns, we have plant and animal. Animals can be human and non-human. Non-human identified to be neutral, while human can be identified as masculine and feminine only. Now, we also have to look at meaning extensions. When we say meaning extensions, there are words that can be figuratively extended, there are words that can be metaphorically extended, and there are words that can either be metaphorical or figurative. When we say figurative, we're trying to personify things, nature, their actions, no, the way humans are doing. No, when we say metaphorical, that means we are getting too exaggerated on how we use different words like put it into basket or he's in love. These are different to qualified and these are different to quantified. Now, we also have denotations, connotations, and cultural associations. When we say denotations, connotations, and cultural associations, we refer to how we understand words. Denotations provides meaning coming from books or dictionaries. Connotations, that means the way we understand words according to our emotions, according to experience. And then the last, cultural association, is according to how one particular culture or group of people perceive a particular word. In this case, we have the term boy. For example, in the Philippines, when we say boy, we refer to a helper. But in some culture, this refers to a young man. This refers to a young man. We also have semantic classes of verbs. So we have, for example, the word kick and live. When we say inherently punctual, we mean there are verbs that can end right there. The actions can be ended right there and then. But when we say durative, we are looking at a particular duration. For a particular duration, the day it started and the day it is assumed to be completed. Now, when we say argument structure, we are now counting the number of arguments or the number of noun phrases in a sentence. Dito tayo magbibilang. When we say one argument, there can only be one noun to a one noun to a one verb, like Millie jogs. So you have Millie and jogs. When we say two argument, that means you have a subject and you have an object. Remember, objects are always to be nouns. That means in a sentence that identified to be two arguments, there are two nouns in the sentence associated to the verb. In this case, Lord drank the beer, so you have Lloyd as the subject and you have the object as the beer. The same case with Andrew lives in Pampanga. Now, there are sentences to show the completeness of its thought. It has to be three arguments. That means there is a subject, a direct object, and an indirect object. So, for example, you have Rhoda put the vase on the table. So you have Rhoda as a subject, the vase as an object, on the table as another object. Or there are sentences that can be one or two arguments. When we say one or two arguments, the sentence remains to be complete, even though there's only a subject and a verb, even though the sentence does not have an object. Okay? Now, this is an example of our semantic fields. In this case, for example, in this case, if you would like to do semantic features analysis for man, woman, boy, or girl, no, this is how we do it. So, in the case of man, for example, in the case of man, we have to put a check for plus male and an X to minus male, an X to plus young, and a check to minus young. That means a man is an adult male. In the case of a woman, you have to put an X with plus male and a check with minus male, an X with plus young and a check with minus young. That makes a woman as an adult, uh, an adult lady. Okay, and the same principle also applies with boy and girl. Last item, when we say prototypicality, we mean that there are words that are unmarked. No, when we say unmarked, that means there's no particular change in its form. There's no particular change in its form, but there's a possibility that there can be a range in terms of meaning. Okay, so this is what we mean by suprasentential level. And if you try to look, if you're going to review all our topics, it boils down to the principle that words, to better understand the words, we have to look at beyond it. We have to look at it beyond the way we see it. That involves culture, that involves use, that involves association of these words with the other words present in the sentence. That's it. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for being with me the entire semester. See you.